How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for willing to do this.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I've never, to be honest, like I've had so many people contact me uh in the past, and I've just kind of like, they don't want to talk to me, and I'm just like, why do I always say no to these? And then I'm like, I have no reason for saying no, so why not? So you're really like the first one I've ever done. So
Yeah, I noticed that. Thank you.
yeah, no problem.
So I could just jump around then with your career.
For sure.
Is it right that you started out as a dancer first?
Yeah, dancer, performer, like musical theater. And actually a huge reason I was like, oh, Lalainia, just do it because actually Marika and I were in a show together when I was 16, and we were in Ada Green Gables in Charlottetown, and then we lost touch for like years and years, and then she was from Ontario, I was from Vancouver, and she moved here, and then I was like, oh my gosh, Marika. So I'm like, come on, Melania, if Marika's doing it, you can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started in musical theater and dance. Yeah, that was definitely my base and film and TV. The film and TV um basically the business was kind of just forming. I'm that old. And really I would say at that time anyone who was getting started, there was a lot of opportunity to get work or at least to learn. Same with the voice market, like I remember a handful of people kind of just taking me under their wings. Actually, my first paid job was a voice,
Right.
not a cartoon, but it was a radio play. So I actually started, my first bit of work was in radio. We have the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcast System, and they used to do these actually very dramatic and sometimes very dark radio plays.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where I got started and where I realized, I think at that time, like I was a good reader and could make it sound natural and real while reading a script. And in that sense, like I think that kind of just opened that whole market up for me because it was fairly new at the time. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you remember the first job that got you into actor then?
Uh, well, but yeah, the very first paid professional job I had was with the CDC with an absolutely brilliant man named John Giuliani, who has since passed away. And I remember I was 10 years old and we had to do a Southern accent. And I think at the time, I didn't even really know what a Southern accent was, but I knew I had heard it before. And I think back to the fact that I have kids now, right? And so I think like I was 10 and I was totally fine with just like putting on this Southern accent. I knew nothing. There's no internet. There's no, oh, I'm going to research Southern accent. And it was like a really strong Southern drawl kind of accent like that. And I think at the time, like he was just, I think back, he was like, I think he was quite surprised at like how well I could do the accent. And I think I had like four or five callbacks too. It was crazy. And I remember, yeah, the day I got my first job, and that kind of got me on my trajectory into the union. And yeah, I think really the voice work didn't explode until my later teen years. Like I did lots, but until I did more film and TV prior to that, and then um, it kind of took off when I got the role of Clover in My Little Pony.
Yep.
And at that time, they hadn't really brought major productions up yet. Like now it's ridiculous, right? So much is recorded up here. We have the most gifted voice actors really in Vancouver, like world renowned voice actors, but they hadn't really like been doing that yet. So it was a big deal. Like we had multiple callbacks and big drama. Oh, who are you going up for? And are we ever going to hear back? And it was actually a musical one, so you had to be able to sing. And I remember, all of us just kind of like, do you sing? Can you, like I remember Kelly Sheridan at the time, she was like, my gosh, like they want us to sing this song. And I heard her, I'm like, you actually have a great voice. Like, I just didn't even know, because I was always in musical theater, but a lot of people weren't. And so they were like, yeah, we all had to get these songs, and sometimes they changed them last minute. And that really kind of broke open, I think, the voice market for
Yeah.
all of us. Like, I think of a handful of the actors that were in that original piece, and so many of them have gone on to like just huge careers, not just in the voice market. Like Laura Harris, who was part of that, she ended up like on the show 24 and like doing just some really amazing acting pieces. And my good friend Willow Johnson, she ended up doing quite a few. We were friends at the time, and she ended up doing like quite a bit of stuff. But she was also a brilliant singer, and of course Kelly just like ended up killing it with Barbie for
Yeah.
years. And yeah, so yeah, that was kind of the big explosion of the voice market. And to be honest, I got like a really kind of insane amount of work back then. Like I think because the market wasn't saturated, and that was around the time when I got Bulma and Dragon Ball and then Dragon Ball Z. And I think back to a little bit later because I actually left the voice world for quite a few years. And when I came back, like the difference in like how many people were auditioning and who was going up for what. And I was just like, whoa, I was so lucky
Mhm.
initially. I don't think it had anything to do with talent. I think I just had, whatever, I was good at reading something. And I happened, because we did a lot of, it's called ADR, where you're having
Right.
a look at the screen, the three beeps come in, and you have to match what you're supposed to say to the screen. And I had a really good sort of, not at all like photographic, but I was really good at kind of seeing the line, and I didn't really have to read it. So I could just watch and I could kind of like actually make it meet the mouth flaps. And I remember the guys at Ocean, they were just like, oh, we've got a tally running of like who's the quickest and who, and like it's between you and so and so. And I think that was a huge part of it too. Like I could just, for some reason, didn't have to always read. I could just look up and kind of,
Hmm.
I'm a very empathetic person. And so even though it was a cartoon on the screen, I always feel like I felt I could like kind of embody them while I was talking.
Yeah.
And at first, this is wild. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but at first, because it was so new, they used to have like just a hint of the Japanese in
In your ear.
our headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at first it was like, okay, I'm gonna try and match that, I guess. But the problem was with the Japanese versions, a lot of the women sounded the same. Like they were very stereotypical Japanese. So I was like, it was really high, and so it started affecting the voice actors. Like we started kind of doing it like that. They're like, no, no, I don't be influenced by the Japanese. And I remember really early on, I said, do I have to have like the Japanese in my earphone, or can we just take that out? And they're like, oh yeah, no, we can take it out.
Hmm.
As soon as they did that, it was so much easier because inflection and everything in English is so different
Right.
than theirs was so flowy and so, I would say, very feminine. They had very stereotypical, even like the mean characters sounded super feminine, which just didn't cut it like for English. We wanted a little bit more um, depth to the character and probably not boxed in by stereotypes as much. So yeah, I remember once they got the Japanese out, then it was like it was a lot easier. But I do think that sort of influenced a lot of the work that I got because I was good at kind of memorizing the line, looking at the screen, and making it fit and kind of feeling it as we went. So yeah.
Well, even
I'm good at talking. I'm just warning you.
okay, it's fine.
I'll just keep going.
Well, before anime, I did want to ask about some of your live action stuff. What were your experiences on the two episodes you did of 21 Jump Street?
It's so funny. My husband's been pulling up shots with me. That was my actually my very first film and TV
Yeah.
job. Was the one where I played Sherilyn Fenn's little sister. And my husband's pulling up shots right now, going, I'm not sure why Lalainia wasn't called for the trial. Like look at the close relation. That was it's funny because that's come up a couple times. It was amazing. Like it was. I got my first trailer. Sherilyn Fenn, who at the time was a really big up and coming actress, uh, she was very dramatic and she always had an acting coach on the set with her and she was always working through things. I remember I was like fascinated by that. And Johnny was just like such a sweetheart. I remember he smoked. And so I was like a good little Christian girl from a very conservative family. And I remember just kind of like, oh, but he was always like, he would smoke and go, because he'd have to go outside to smoke. And it was like he would do that a lot. Um, but he was always much more talkative when he was doing that. So we would always kind of hang out and he would talk. And yeah, he was a sweetheart. The whole experience was amazing. Um, kind of I think the initial TV boost that I needed to really get interested in film and TV because, like I said, it was just really starting to grow at that time in Vancouver.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then a few years later, I played a teen mom on it, but that was after Johnny Depp was gone. And because at 10, I looked completely different than at
Yeah.
15 or 16. So yeah, yeah. So that was fun. It was, yeah. I look back and I'm just like, is that me? That is so weird.
Yeah.
And yet it's an incredibly vivid memory, like it obviously was a life-changing moment for me.
Hmm. What about with this was later on in the 90s, but it was disturbing behavior.
Yeah, disturbing behavior was, oh my gosh, that was I think anyone who worked on that, it was a really interesting experience because most of our filming took place at night. So we had a lot of night shooting. And so the school stuff, totally normal, totally fun. I just remember I had just come off playing Peter Pan in in a musical in Vancouver. So I had this crazy short hair. And I was surrounded by these stunningly beautiful girls. And I had this like, I just remember feeling just kind of like, why did he pick me for this? Like, I don't know. And it's sad in the end, in the final cut in the movie, a bunch of my lines got cut, but that's pretty typical when it comes to film and TV. But yeah, I just remember kind of feeling a bit like a zombie because we'd be filming overnight for multiple days in a row. And so, your day wouldn't start till say like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then you wouldn't be like go till 7 or 8 in the morning. And I just remember like driving home. I'm like, okay, stay awake,
Yeah.
stay awake. My mom had always done night shift. She's like, now you know what it feels like. I'm like, yes, I do. So that was fun. Actually, David Nutter, who directed um, that episode, I mean, that movie, he had also, um, well, he had done some of the original X Files. Like he had worked quite a bit on the X Files. And so he was really like, he just loved Vancouver actors and Vancouver people. And so, in that sense, it was a really great experience because often we were kind of like, oh, they're the Canadians, they
Hmm.
only get like principal roles or it hadn't really opened up where Vancouver actors were going to and from at LA and working on all sorts of things. And so I just remember he was really, yeah, really respectful of us. and you know, James Marsden and Katie Holmes playing the leads. James was awesome. I just remember Katie being very, it was really different for her. It was her first kind of big movie, whereas James was just like, he was a little bit older too, and just very, very gung ho. And in the end, he made us all these T-shirts that said "Be the Ball." I wore it for pajamas for many, many years. But yeah, so it was good. It was a good experience, but weird, zombie like.
Yeah. Well, and with some of the other people that you've been cast alongside of, like Margot Kidder and Beverly D'Angelo, and what's the most starstruck you've been, do you think?
It's interesting because I think something happens when you're a child, when you start. I never really saw the actors as
Actors.
like, yeah, like different or stars or, I mean, I do remember getting my role as Kidder's um, daughter. So there was a series that never aired called Nancy Drew and Daughter, and we filmed 3 episodes. And that I do remember getting that role because I was cast as her daughter. She was Nancy Drew, I was her daughter, and we were to be solving crimes and stuff together. And I do remember just thinking, that's Lois Lane. Like, that's Lois Lane, because that was one thing I'd seen younger before I was even an actor.
Yeah.
And I remember, we were supposed to be doing like bonding activities and stuff. And I remember she took me over to, she was initially from here. And what was so strange was it turned out that my dad worked with, oh gosh, what was it? My dad worked with her dad or brother. Anyway, there was some weird like family connection. And so she was like, we're practically related. She was a very, very quirky lady.
Mhm.
And I just remember being taken to somebody's house. We were supposed to be like bonding. I don't know. We were maybe going to go to Stanley Park or, do something maybe more child friendly. But I just remember she took me to this artist house. So it was an artist named Colin James. He's like, at that time, like quite well known, quite famous. I didn't know who he was at the time. Um, but we basically just sat there and they had like wine and cheese and smoked and I just sat there feeling a little uncomfortable and going, this is the bonding activity. And then there's a big, I don't know how much you know, but there was a big accident on set and big accident. I was there. It's not a big accident. But the brakes of the car jarred. It was a beautiful old 50s Chevy, I think. And Margot hurt her neck because it kind of did that. Um, but at the same time, her dad passed away. And there was kind of a perfect storm for her. And she's since been diagnosed, she was diagnosed with bipolar, right? And so at the time, she didn't know. And she went on a total manic episode. And she was just like, she had this massive, like, scrapbook with pictures that she was doing all the time. And yet she had had the car accident. Um, and she was in pain, I guess, a lot of the time. And so we'd be doing scenes and she'd be like squeezing my hand, like just like I'd be like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm moving you, don't respond, but like hugely, I'm just supposed to be like teenager in the scene and she's just like grabbing onto me. And it was very shortly after that, like there ended up a lawsuit and
Yeah.
basically my one big shot of my own TV series uh, finished after 3 episodes, and there was a huge lawsuit. And that back when she was like, she kind of went a little bit crazy, and she was found on the front lawn of somewhere in LA. And that was after that, she ended up getting help and getting diagnosed. And it was actually super cool. I would say about 6 years later, 5 or 6 years later, I got a role in a movie called Silent Cradle. And she was the cop investigator on it. And it was really neat because I hadn't seen her. Like I hadn't seen her since I think I was 15 when I did that show, and I hadn't seen her in forever. And I was a little bit sad, obviously, that it hadn't gone through, and sad when I saw everything that she had gone through. Um, but then I got to see her, and we reminisced, and basically just got to talk about it because I didn't have anyone to talk about. Like everything was hush hushed, and just talked to her about how she had been suffering and undiagnosed. And so that was one of those cool moments where something kind of came full circle, which is so rare in the business. Um, and it was actually also really, really cool role. It was with her and, oh gosh, I'm terrible with names. She was from The Sopranos, something Brasco. Anyway, she was amazing, amazing actress at the time, and she was on The Sopranos at the time too. So it was like I was just like, I'm working with real actors here, and I'll just never forget the experience because it was. So there was another actor on it. I won't name who he was. Quite famous actor as well, who was playing the doctor in the movie. And the plot line of the movie was I was a young swimmer who ends up getting pregnant. Um, but this doctor basically says, well, lots of people are looking uh, for adoption, all that kind of stuff. I say, no, I'm not interested. And then what happens is Lorraine Bracco, that was her name,
Oh yeah.
Lorraine Bracco. Uh, at the time, she's pregnant and she's in the hospital. Her baby dies. And so he actually takes my baby and gives it to her. And I don't know. I'm told my baby's dead. So big, weird, convoluted story. But I remember at the time she was dating an actor named Edward James Olmos, who I
Yeah.
just loved, like total amazing gangster dude. Um, he's really like thoughtful and very nice to talk to. And I'll never forget it because after our scene, there's a scene where she comes and confronts me after I've dove and come out of the water, and she comes into the dressing room. And I remember after that, he came up to her, and this is Edward James Olmos, who like had won an Oscar. And he comes up, and he's like, "You are a brilliant actress, brilliant. Stay with it. You are so brilliant." He said that was beautiful work, and I'm just like,
Wow.
that. I was starstruck. I was starstruck in that moment. Like I'd probably seen every movie he had ever made as well, and I was just like, I can't believe you just said that to me. So yeah, so that was a very, very good kind of full circle experience for me, getting connected with Margot again, and then working with someone like Lorraine Bracco, and to have Edward James almost say that to me. I mean, I didn't end up famous anyway, but so it's nice to hear.
Well, it is kind of related to Margot in the sense of people that are gone too soon. Did you have a tribute memory for Kirby Morrow?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it actually when I heard that. Um, I've struggled with quite bad depression in my life, and so my heart just really went out to him. Um, all I can say is we had an absolute blast when we recorded Ninja Turtles, and it was like, because very rarely do you get to be with your fellow actors. Like it's not very common. Usually you're in a booth on your own, but I think they wanted the feeling and the dynamics of all of us um, gaining from each other's energy. So we actually recorded in the same room. We had a massive screen with the film on it, and then we were each at our own microphones. So it
Hmm.
was a really, recording that whole series was really different and such a fun experience compared to like my other experiences. Because you just never ever got to do that. Sometimes when you're recording live act, like a live one rather than voiceover, um, that can happen, but it was just so rare. And so, yeah, I remember just feeling really shocked because he really was such a he was such a dude at the time, like, dude, right? And at the time it's hard because I think you don't know other people are suffering.
Right.
You yourself are suffering and you don't want to be a burden to people. A huge reason why I stepped away from acting was because of my struggle with depression, and I knew at the time it was probably going to crush me.
Hmm.
Now it says it's unstable. Sorry.
Oh, it's good.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had to step back. I knew for my health, I had to step back. But I think sometimes when that's what you do, that's who you are, um, then your identity and who you are is so much wrapped up in what you do. And I just know I've never met one person who disliked him. Yeah, I mean, how rare is that, right? How rare is that? I just remember he was like a dude. And part of that's because they were playing the Ninja Turtles, obviously.
Yeah.
So they got into that sort of but all the guys on that were so fun and such dudes. And I was the only girl, so it was so weird showing up for recording. It was like, hi, boy, like a room full of testosterone. Oh, and then me,
Yeah.
over the quarter. I do remember laughing a lot though too. Yeah, yeah. So sad, really sad.
So then, your first anime role is actually one of my favorite ones of yours is a Mermaid Scar.
Ah, yes, very dramatic.
Yep.
Honestly, I remember it's so hard to remember the world without the internet, and yet it there really wasn't an internet back then. And so our exposure was so limited. We had no idea about this whole anime world, where they actually told dramatic stories, sometimes violent stories on screen. And I remember just like I said, good little conservative Christian girl, like just going, what, what? I thought this was a cartoon, like just but at the same time, like how cool was it for us to be able to do more dramatic stuff, than just cartoon work, right? That's probably, I have this theory. So when I first started, there was a real wave of realism in voice work. So they wanted really real, genuine sounding voices, really honest, nothing cartoony. Like I remember them just saying, like if it's anywhere close to cartoony, we don't want it. And so I got a ton of work because that's sort of my forte, just more natural. Like I said, I started in radio plays, and then as things started shifting into really cartoony, and so the voice actors that could do both the really cartoony stuff and the genuine sort of more natural stuff, they just flew. And I remember just going, I can try a funny voice, but it doesn't sound very good. Like like Marika is just amazing at it, right? Like she
Yeah.
can really the bit, and stuff like that. I'm like, and it was hard because so many of the directors I'd worked with, so many of them on so many projects, and I did feel kind of like I was disappointing them a little bit. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm really trying. I also have a very, very feminine sounding voice. And so like I couldn't do like, I couldn't just go ahead like Kathleen and be like crazy witch princess with this like low voice and then come up here. I just didn't have it. I'm like, I don't have this range. And so I look back to the time when I was getting to do things like Mermaid's Car and oh gosh, what's some of the more dramatic ones? Um,
Please save my Earth, kind of a.
yes, exactly. Stuff like that. And I remember just loving it, like feeling in my element and just it was such a great marriage between my acting career and my voice career, like I loved it. And a lot of my stuff I recorded at Ocean in Vancouver, which I think is called something different now, but I don't know. Um, and they were just so great. They were such collaborators on it and real artists in themselves, like really they cared about like there was crazy anime fans, right? Like they wanted to do it justice. And so I think back and I think we were really lucky to kind of spearhead that movement in Vancouver and kind of lay a foundation for like I remember, even even when so I did the original Dragon Ball Z and then I remember like, oh well, Bulma in sorry original Dragon Ball, and then they're like, well, Bulma in Dragon Ball Z is more mature, and so I think we might cast a different actor, and they had listened to some people in LA and stuff like that, and they're just like, as much as she's kind of crazy and goofy, like we really like your naturalness with it. So, can you give it a try and just kind of try and make her sound older? Yeah, so I think we were just really lucky that we had such passionate people, like the people who were trying to get it voiced in North America were such crazy fans and so passionate about it. Like they were really, really picky when it came to what we did and how we did it. And I think that I really do think that laid the foundation for Vancouver being such a great place to do voice work because our standards were high. And I mean, I literally saw like people's careers like created in front of me, who I just kind of started with. And then you realize just, well, I mean, like Kathleen is one of them. And just some of the guys, and we're just going, literally, you can do any voice they ask you to do. Like you can be a child, you can be a grown up, you can be a pirate, you can be something that doesn't even use words and it sounds amazing, Um, so yeah, I think the directors and stuff were a big influence on that, just holding us to really high standards.
Do you remember? This would have been, I think, your second anime role. You had a really cool role in a Ranma one half,
You know what's so crazy is that
or is
I
it?
don't
You
oh look at her. I always love honestly, I got to play the best characters. And I think I always got like some of the sassy ones, which was so great because the really sweet ones were awesome. And I did a lot of princess stuff, like I loved the princess stuff, but I used to love it. If for some reason in the anime arena, I got a lot of like the sassy kind of like bossy ones or like, Bulma, who's just like total spaz. I remember the director, actually the producer, I did this one thing with my voice that he used to love so much. He's like, do it again, do it again. I'm just like, I don't, all it was like a scream with vibrato. Like I would just be like, ah, like just like, and he was just like, oh, it's so funny. I'm just like, okay. But I think I have a bit of like, my voice can get that kind of nasal, almost like more demanding tone to my voice. And I think that's when I started getting some of the sassier, kind of meaner people who were like really opinion. I was just like, oh, I thought those ones were really fun. I can't remember if she was one of those, but I do remember getting like loving to play. Even Bulma was so fun because she was so opinionated and so obnoxious. It's so weird though, like when you do like research for all those shows, like how many different versions
Right.
there are. Like I had no idea like that some people, oh, this is my favorite version and no, this is my favorite version, you know, because I've had people send me stuff before saying, oh, isn't this what you were on? And then I'm looking, I'm like, I'm listening and I'm going, that's not me. You know, it's like this is another version, I'm pretty sure. And then I'm like, am I so what of it that I don't recognize my own voice? Like literally that was not that long ago that someone sent me a clip and I'm like, so then I looked down, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like multiple versions and people have their favorite versions of Dragon Ball and their favorite, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is a whole, and there's lots of arguments like around
Yep.
it. Too, people are very passionate about what they love and what they don't, and I'm like, this is an internet trail that I am not going to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy
Well,
internet. Yeah.
well, who do you have more affinity with between your two women in the Gundam franchise, Stella or Anu?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I felt really honored on that one to be able to play two different things because it was just so rare that that would happen unless you're Kathleen and you can literally make your voice sound like somebody else's voice. Um, huh. I don't know that I could choose. They both had such great. I think I what I loved was the difference, like just being able to play um two different characters that uh had yeah different psyches really, right? Different. I know it sounds like so actor, but when you like I was doing a lot of voice work and so for me it was really fun to get you know whether it was someone who was like shell shocked or because often you know voice work can be like pretty similar stuff you're doing the same thing all the time but with when the anime came in and it had more dramatic edge to it um although there's always a little bit of comedy mixed in you got to appreciate the Japanese for that um but definitely like the characters became more diverse and we were able to like explore in a strange way actually act with them you know
Yeah.
like we actually kind of got to act with them instead of focusing just on when it was slower and it wasn't so crazed often when I was playing funny story I had a terrible time saying warriors when I was doing Ronin Warriors
Yeah.
and we had to record me saying that word like 500 times because I just it's the honestly I swear it's the only word in the English language I ever had trouble and I couldn't hear what they were saying. They're like it sounded weird again. I'm like because I don't even I'm like I would say it so I wonder if I would like call them or something you know warriors or what but it was because I was trying to say the R in warriors. So that's what I used to sound like. I used to say like warriors and they're like what are you doing? Like it sounds really weird. So when I once we figured that out and it's just warriors, then we had no problems. But I'm telling you, like I probably had to say that word like 600 times. And it'd be a perfect take. And I did a lot of work with this one director named Stan, who was just the best. And he would just be like, I'd turn and look. He'd be like, no. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Then we figured out it was so we just listened to it like almost on a loop. I'm like, oh, I know it. Well, there's R's in there. He's like, yeah, you don't really say the R's. Like it's just kind of like warrior. I'm like, that's what it is. I'm saying the R's. And so I sound like not very bright every time I say warriors. Yeah, so that was a total aside. I'm sorry. But
That's funny.
yeah, just like it's nice when it was the more dramatic ones compared to the crazy action ones, because the action ones were very much, there was so a lot of battle cries. I was very good though. I'm like, just let it run. And I was really good at like nailing like everything. I could do like a whole page where typically we would just do like beep, 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 and then you do your grunt, you go, or, whatever you need to do. But I'd be like, just run it, just run the whole thing. And I would just love to do the whole scene, like the whole fighting scene at once or something like that. It was really fun. Totally forgot all that. It's been so long. Yeah.
Well, I would think that Yukio in Black Lagoon would stand out probably the most because she has a full circle tragic.
Yes. Yes. And that was the first one. I think that was the first role where I realized how passionate people were about anime and like the dramatic side of anime. Like I think really in my mind I thought of anime as cartoons,
Mhm.
And that was the first one where it's like this is a real dramatic piece and in its entirety quite beautiful, right? And the artists that work on the projects, were stunning and just putting so much passion into their art form. And I was totally clueless. That was the first one where I was like, this is a film. Like this
Yeah.
is a beautiful, yeah, a beautiful film that follows a story. And yeah, again, just kind of so thankful, like to get the opportunity, when I would get a role and I would just be like, this is amazing, like that I'm getting to do this. And it was different because with other cartoons, you would do the voice first, right? Like you do the voice and then they cartoon to your voice, which was always great in the sense that you could do whatever you wanted. But with these pieces, like I felt like my character was already created and established. Like I had to fit and fill that character and bring it to life. And I remember just like I definitely didn't take it lightly. Like I remember working on that piece and just thinking, this is like a really beautiful piece of film and it's gotta feel real, it's gotta my character already exists there and I really want yeah, I want to do her justice. I want her to have that full circle feel to it. And I do, looking back, I do think that's what Vancouver voice artists brought to those pieces. Like they compared to say stuff that was done in LA. I just think we had, I don't know, we're more real. Canadians were just a little more real sometimes. And so and we were new, right? So we weren't affected, we weren't jaded, we were kind of fascinated by the process still. So I do think that's a lot of why Vancouver became a really popular place to do voice work because, yeah, not just our excitement, but just, yeah, our naturalness. There's a real naturalness to the people producing, the voice work, depending on the piece. But a piece like that, if it got too cartoony sounding or anything like that, it was like, let's do that again, make it a little more natural, a little more hate this word, but like organic, so it's like coming from her instead of I'm watching her and my voice is going on top. Like I really did, I loved that challenge. I loved the challenge of I wanted my voice to fit perfectly to her mouth moving. Like I hated it when there was an extra syllable that didn't seem to match. And I'd be like, can we do it again? I think I can do that better. And because I was pretty fast with most stuff, like I was able to do that. And so, yeah, I think it's really neat when I look back and I think of how that was sort of a whole art form being introduced to North America, and we kind of got to be on the front end of it,
Mhm.
And then I think of the fans now, like I said, like I had so many opportunities to, do Comic Cons, and I had lots of friends that did all that kind of stuff. And I'm an introvert by nature, and the thought, I got so, like, at the time when it was at its height, I got so many offers to fly different places, and a part of me was just like, I'm an actor and I've done my work. This part of it seems weird. I don't, like, I was just, yeah, I was too, I don't want to say shy, but I was too introverted. I was like, I don't think I could go and sit somewhere for 2 days and answer questions and sign autographs. And so that was something I never really pursued. But of course, now that I have kids, I'm like, why did you do that, Mom? I was telling them all the different, got offered to go to Australia, got offered, tons in LA. And I was just like, and then, like I said, I stepped away for quite a few years. So when I came back, I definitely didn't feel confident
Hmm.
doing something like that. So yeah, I kind of missed that boat. I look back going, what was my problem? That would have been so fun. But I was at a different point in my career. So yeah, I loved the work though. I loved it. I really did.
Well, I did, going back to Black Lagoon, I would think that, considering that Yukio, killed herself after seeing her bodyguard die, do you think that was the darkest headspace you had to go for anime?
Yes, absolutely. That's by far. There was a lot of violent stuff, but not stuff where you actually had to, like I said, embody somebody where you're like, I need to do this justice. This is a very deep story that they're trying to tell, and just big thing for me, I just never wanted it to sound fake.
Hmm.
I just wanted it to feel real and for people to, yeah, experience the beauty of it. Because I was surprised. I was like, wow, this is an incredible art form. I didn't love all the violence because I don't really love the sight of blood. And some of them had, a lot of blood in it. Um, but at the same time, I could tell it was really connecting with people and telling stories that, I don't know, I am somebody who I feel like we need more fantasy, we need more storytelling to really understand ourselves as people. I don't necessarily think the realism of life always speaks to us. I think allegory and storytelling can be very powerful, and that's where I think anime does an incredible job. And it's because it comes from, a very broken people that had to rebuild their lives, after World War II in Japan. That, I mean, there's a reason anime comes out of Japan,
Hmm.
like it was a culture that had to be stifled for quite some time in order to build, in order to get, successful and build an economy, and then just when you clamp it down for too long, then I think just boom, so many of the graphic novelists and all that kind of stuff. I think there is a huge reason why they really were on the forefront of that movement and
Hmm.
this sort of creative art that is, yeah, always walk the line of reality, not the silly stuff. They also, I've been to Japan a couple times, and it's so weird because that's their dichotomy of life. They have reality and then they have fantasy.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing, people on the subways, and they had their briefcases, and they would come in, sit down, and go like this.
Hmm.
And it was like, they're obviously not asleep. And so I remember our translator, she's like, they do that because in Japan, if you see anyone older than you have to get up. You have to give your seat. And they will if you're awake. But they kind of get around the rule by pretending to be asleep. And
Hmm.
it was like everyone was sitting on the subway
Yep.
like this. I'm like, this is the weirdest thing. But again, when you live in a culture that had so much pressure, right? Like they were finding these fun little ways to get around it. And I'll never forget, like this businessman sitting there with his graphic novel. Like I was just like, that is not something you would see in North America. I mean, you would now,
Yeah. But not
but back then, no, that was not something you would have seen. So yeah, they always I think there's a reason they were at the forefront of that. Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing about Yukio is that do you remember how you could personally relate to her, if anything?
I think at the time, I've kind of said like I've struggled with depression in my life, and I do remember um, thinking she was such a good, delicate mix of uh, strength and softness, and really brave, and I remember, yeah, I remember just really loving that about her, and thinking, uh, I'm kind of like her. I would say out of all the characters I've ever played, she's maybe the one I'm the most like, and in that sense, maybe one of the easiest to play. Um, and she's dramatic, and I'm dramatic. But yeah, I think she was by far the most real character I ever got to play.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was just such a wonderful experience. Even in the more realistic ones I did, there was still always different things that had, I don't know, like I said, they're also very good at poking fun at things and doing silly things even within their serious stuff. But this one was very different. It was very, like I said, it was an epic tale. It was very natural. And yeah, I just remember kind of feeling that weight of wanting to do it justice and thinking this is almost like a historical character, like these movies are making history in a way. And yeah, just feeling really, there was a few along the way where yeah, I felt um, honored to play her. Same as, completely different genre, but same as getting to play Venus in Ninja Turtles, because there just had never been a female Ninja Turtle, and
Right.
you kind of have this sense as an actor. On one hand, you're just like, okay, it's my job, this is what I do. But I remember, yeah, there were certain projects that came along, and just going, this is different, this is new, and I feel like this is kind of like history in the making. Like you kind of know things are changing, and to
Right.
be a part of that change, yeah, to be a part of the medium of anime, actually communicating really deep and difficult truths, uh, instead of a lot, Dragon Ball Z, I could name a zillion of them that I did. Um, yeah, I definitely felt uh, so much more connected, and like, wow, this is a deep story that is gonna affect people, because that was rare. That
Hmm.
was very rare at the time. Yeah.
And so this is an anime, but one of my friends wanted me to ask you. They actually had they couldn't find very much info about it, but they found a tape at like a Goodwill or something. It was something called Troll Tales,
Yes.
and there's like no info about it
Yeah.
online anywhere.
Isn't that funny? I know. I did almost the whole series, but what happened? And to be honest, I don't know what ended up happening, but um that was right when I decided to, so I ended up with a really serious eating disorder.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I was working on Troll Tales at the time. Um and I remember finally like telling my family, kind of like explaining that I was really suffering from depression, and that I wasn't healthy. And I was working on Troll Tales. I'd just gotten, the lead on the series, and I was super excited because it was like the first non ADR job I'd had in a while. And that year, actually, my career was just taking off. Like it was like the most successful. I did like multiple leads in TV shows, and I just crashed. And I remember thinking, okay, I'll take 2 weeks off. I'll take 2 weeks off. Well, when you open the floodgates, they keep flowing
Yeah.
until you figure out what's going on. And I remember actually, it's one of my favorite memories at the time, and that was, I remember having to have the conversation. In fact, my family had the conversation because I just wasn't in a state to do it, but just that I was going to be off for a while, and I wasn't going to be an audition. I wasn't going to be available. And I remember just feeling awful about Troll Tales because I think we had recorded probably like 6 or 7 episodes at that point. And basically like I got the most stunningly beautiful bouquet of flowers from
Uh-huh.
them, just yeah, like just seeing like from Ocean, like I said, from Stan, and just a lot of acting, you're quite anonymous and you don't feel overly cared for because you're just one of many. And I remember out of all of the people that I worked with, worked for, um, the Ocean group was the one group that sent me this stunningly beautiful bouquet of flowers, said, "Don't worry about anything. We love you. We just want you to get healthy." And I remember just like being stunned because I had never let anyone down in my life, like I was hardcore from a really young age, and I came back from a zillion holidays for callbacks and for auditions, and I remember just kind of thinking like, I can't do this, and I did. And so that, I don't know if maybe they ended up, I feel like they found somebody else for my part and continued recording, but it didn't take off. So
Mhm.
that's that weird
Okay.
little, oh my gosh, like what a bizarre, I did it, but kind of, but not really. So strange.
Yeah.
So strange when I think back. Yeah.
Well, I have my own story and related to your performances like that, but I don't think I've told other people that have been in series that are like the same series, but I can just tell you that you've been like you for anime, like your voice has been in my head probably since I was 9, and I used to I had this little portable DVD player, and I remember I would plug into that when there was literal domestic abuse going on in the
Mhm.
background. So you were one of the people that helped me get through that.
That's so awesome. I think that is not uncommon for people to be able to find a solace in some of these stories. And like I said, I think allegory and storytelling is really important. Um, Reality can be a bit harsh,
Yeah.
and sometimes we need that removal and escape. Mine was musicals, Sound of Music, Judy Garland, Over the Rainbow. But yeah, I'm honored that that would be part of your life. And I'm thrilled that, I said yes to do an interview. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, okay, it's not that big a deal. Yeah. I'm
Well,
glad it was you. I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah.
oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh gosh. Um, I think, like I said, the biggest thing with me, um, so twofold. As a voice actor, I would say I'm really proud of the heart and soul that I put into what I did. I did a lot of comedy as well, but really, when I look back to some of the voice work I did, I think my gift was being natural and heartfelt and honest. And so, voice wise, that's definitely something I'm really proud of. Uh, and I think myself as a performer, um, just that I think everybody ebbs and flows in their life. There's times when you love something, and then there's times where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think my young self just didn't understand that, that life ebbs and flows. And I remember thinking, even when hearing about Kirby, I remember thinking, like, we're so hard on ourselves for, either making it or failing.
Hmm.
And it's one of the old, it's one of these art forms where, you can be riding on top of the world because you're getting jobs. And then all of a sudden the jobs stop and you take it personally, even though it's nothing personal. At one point you were working, at one point you're not. And I think looking back for me, it's the idea that life is going to ebb and flow. And so to not lose heart, because I don't think I've lost any of my passion for the art form. I'm not doing it anymore. I'd probably love to go back to it at some time. It's just not the time right now with my family and my kids, and they're my main priority, right? But that's okay. Like life, I think when I was young, I was like, oh, I quit. I abandoned it, and had all these dramatic words for it. And now that I see kind of the legacy that's living on in the art form that's, truly like changed the face of animation, I just think we had no idea. We had no idea at the time that this was going to be a language that so many people would end up speaking,
Hmm.
So just, yeah, so just to a legacy would be to that I was okay with the ebb and flow of the art form and my career and life, and just to encourage people to do the same with their lives. It doesn't have to always look one way. We can have obsessive passions, but then we can also go, kind of done with that for now,
Yeah.
and take a break, and then you'd be amazed at how much full circle comes around. So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Well, thank you. This is a honor to have you be my 252nd.
Awesome, so fantastic.
Yeah.
And you're great at what you do, and you ask great questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'll be sure to send this to you once I have it up if you want to see it.
I would. Yeah, well, my kids would. I don't want to watch it, but my kids will want to see it. Yeah.
Well, have a good rest of your day then.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye.